Hi guys! In this video, we are going to learn how to create and deploy some resources in Azure with PowerShell from our local machines. I am data engineer and I am dedicated to that, so most of the resources that we are going to create are data related. As a summary, we are going to start creating a resource group, then we are going to create an storage account resource, we are going to create a blob storage container on it, we are going to create a data factory resource, and to complete the process, we are going to deploy on the data factory our ARM template. Before starting with the code, maybe some of you are already thinking why not to use a pipeline from Azure DevOps to deploy this, or why not to generate a Visual Studio Azure resource project. Well, in my case, I usually work in small projects or even medium ones, where my clients are not interested on keeping continuous development and continuous integrations, just because the development is going to be a one-time thing, and designing an Azure DevOps pipeline makes not too much sense. Regarding the Visual Studio Azure Resource Group projects, they are an interesting option, but I realized that in every deployment I needed to fill some static values, also fill the variables, and that's something that I would like to avoid. Also, that PowerShell inside is still based on the old Azure RM module that has already changed. Probably this will change over time, but I just decided to follow this PowerShell approach for this kind of projects. As I said, these projects are small ones and one-time deployment ones, and with this I mean that the project is not going to evolve in the future in new evolutives or new versions, okay? But usually my customers have several environments, so I need to be sure to deploy the same code in development, test, acceptance or production environments. Once said that, let's start reviewing this. First of all, let's take a look at the files. There is a PowerShell file, of course, that will contain all the code execution. We will get into more detail later. There are some variable files that are called control publish plus the name of the environment. We should have a file per each environment that we have. We are going to open one of them and we can see that this document in XML format contains variable values. Some of them, as the resource group name or the storage account name, contains values. Some others, like the storage account tier, not. The idea is that our PowerShell will read all the values here and will populate the corresponding variables. The next two files are the files that we obtained from Azure when we generated the ARM template from our data factory. One contains in JSON format the configuration of all the elements, the pipelines, activities, datasets, linked servers, triggers, everything inside. The second one, also in JSON format, contains some configuration values of our data factory. All the values in these two files have been parameterized. We can see that all the values here have variable names contained in the XML file, and if we go to the previous file, happens exactly the same as this blob container variable. If you don't know how to get an ARM template from a data factory, I'll show you. We are going to open my data factory resource. We are going to author and monitor and to the author area. Here in the top bar, we have an ARM template option and we can export it. We are going to uncompress it, and these two files are the same that we already saw in the deployment folder, but in this case, these ones are not tokenized. The module that we are going to use in our PowerShell is the Azure AZ, that is replacing the old Azure RM. If you have the RM already installed, that is the one by default, you should uninstall it first to avoid errors. Running as administrator these commands, you will be able to install it. Okay, so let's start reviewing the PowerShell code as we execute it. But first, let's take a look at the Azure portal so that we can check that there is nothing already in my subscription. As you can see, it's totally empty. The first thing that the code is doing is to ask us for the deployment environment. Where do we want to deploy? Dev, test, acceptance, or production? In our case, we are going to deploy it in production. After that, the process is going to ask us if the environment is correct, showing us the name of the file that is going to use to get the variables. We are going to say yes, and all the variables assignments are going to happen. We don't have any login here, so we are going to the code. This part is going to the production XML and is going to assign all the values to variables. Once this is done, our deployment process will start. The process will connect to Azure and it's going to ask us for the credentials. Here is the part of our code to create the connection. So from this pop-up, I'm going to choose my account to do the login. Once that the login is done, the deployment will start. We have here a warning because my account is associated to multiple subscriptions, but it is in the script decoding to set the context of the subscription, so do not worry about that, it's just a warning. Now the deployment will start creating the resource group in case that it doesn't already exist. This is the part of the code that checks the existence and deploys it, and this is the functions for creating new resource groups. Okay, seems that the deployment went well and already started with the next resource, the storage account. Here happens the same, it's only going to deploy it in case that it's already not created. And here is the part of the code where we create the storage account with this function. There are parameters in the function as the tier or the replication that are mandatory, so in case that we don't have a value in the control publish template, they will have a default value assigned. Okay, the storage account should be there now. The blob storage is starting now. If we see the code, it's prepared to deploy table storage or blob containers. In this case, the table storage values are empty in the XML, so it's only going to deploy the blob storage. These are the functions to deploy both. Okay, it's done. Now it's time for the data factory to be deployed. This is the part of the code that checks if exists and if not, creates it with this function. And now that our data factory is ready, it will start with the ARM template. It will first validate that everything in the code is fine, and then it will start deploying the pipelines, activities, dataset, etc. This part of the code is more complex, given that we have to replace most of the variables here. So we load all the file's content into variables, and then we replace the values in the code with the values we loaded from the XML. Once that is done, the deployment will start with these new variables using this function. Okay, that's it. The process finished successfully. We are going back to the Azure portal and we are going to refresh the page. Now we can see the created resource group. Inside of it, we can see a storage account and a data factory. If we open the storage account, in the tables part there's nothing, and in the blob container we can see the one that we created. And if we move now to the data factory, author and monitor, to the authors area, we have here a pipeline with an activity, 2 datasets, and if we go to the manage area, we can see that we have 2 linked services and a trigger on it. So in a little bit more than a minute's time, we have a complete solution deployed in the environment that we want. We could now re-execute again the whole process, but given that all the resources already exist, nothing is going to be deployed except in the case of the data factory ARM template, where the deployment always happens. Well, that's all for now. I hope you found this video useful. Thanks for watching.